All right, so this is where we are. All right, so a couple of things real quick. When you get your videos, you're going to also get a couple of sheets from me. One is just a character sheet. We're going to go over characters today, and I want to make sure that you have this for your own. It just kind of notes, and it also gives you the opportunity to work on it for your own characters. And then additionally, there's resources here, and the resources for the books on writing are actually culled together from conversations with the board of directors and the conference committee. These are titles that were recommended by the various writers who comprise the board of directors and conference committee. It's just a very short list. There are so many good books on writing, but these will be some that you can look into that will be very helpful for you. And also there'll be information on there for broadleaf writers and my personal information as well. All right. So we are here to discuss storytelling. And as I mentioned, the chat box keeps messing me up. My name is Zachary Steele. I am the author of The Weight of Ashes and the executive director and founder of Broadleaf Writers, which you can find at broadleafwriters.com. And if we're going to talk about storytelling, we need to start in the beginning. All right, what is a story? And it seems like a very basic question, but we're going to start at the beginning because that's what you do in a story. Now, a story is about how the things that happen affect someone in pursuit of a difficult goal and how that someone changes internally. Or to put it in a much easier way, it's about a change within a character fueled by a desire. Now, the elements that we're going to talk about today, and this is sort of your rough outline of what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to start with characters, empathy, and visual aids. And we will go then, breaking down memorable characters, iconic images, what I call Do You See What I See? Empathy and emotional connection. Then we're going to move into theme and catalyst, which is going to include what's it all about. And again, it's like looking at a table of contents. You have no idea what it means. That's fun. So these are just the topics we're going to cover. Then we're going to cover the hook, the B story, and the bad guys close in, which is going to include turning the world upside down. When is a B a good thing? For me, it was always a good thing in school. And tightening the screws. And then finally, we're going to talk about learning the lesson, return to home, and the finale. And that will be figuring it all out. Home is where the heart is, and one and done. All right, so we're going to start with characters. And we're going to start with a little interactive game. I'm going to open up the chat so that I can see what's going on here. But what I want you to do is just in the chat real quick, when you see an image, tell me who that is. Is it really tough? Marianne wins. It's Harry Potter. That was a tough one. I know, very, very tough. All right, what about this one? Sherlock Holmes, there you go. And what about this one? Charlotte, exactly. Okay, so sure, two of these were movies, and that does simplify things. But I would like to hear from you. What do all of these images have in common? Okay, I'm going to go with Marianne on that one. Marianne says, and so did Georgia, recognizable characters. They're completely, it's great PR. Exactly right, Jess. You would know about that. So what they all have in common is that they are iconic images. And again, sure, there are Charlotte and Harry are very easy to identify because, you know, Harry is everywhere, and in Charlotte you recognize if you saw the movie. But Sherlock is in this image is not something that we specifically saw. Yeah, they've done movies, done shows and stuff, but not everybody has seen them. And it's important to remember that these characters have iconic characteristics or iconic stories that you remember them for, and you will always identify them as the centerpiece of that story. You know, Harry, obviously, because of his lightning scar, Sherlock because of the hat and pipe, and Charlotte for, you know, I mean, how many talking spiders have you ever really heard about? Yes, that's correct. Lori, it is funny. The guy in the hat, we know the identifiers, correct. So talking about characters, let's break down what it takes for you to create a vibrant and memorable character. Now, first and foremost, you're going to want to have a description that is memorable, right? And this description is going to include the physical characteristics of your character, their mannerisms, their habits, and their vocal tendencies, their personality. And then we want to talk about the background of the character. And you have to know their history, the loves, the failures, and everything that defines who they were. We need to know about their motivation. And there's a couple phrases that I'm gonna mention multiple times, and I want to make sure you guys understand them fully and that you understand their place in your story. The first is the conscious desire, and this is the very outward thing that they want. The second one is, well, that's who are they doing it for, and who are they doing it for? The second one is the unconscious misbelief. Now, unconscious misbelief is quite simply just the thing they believe about themselves, you know, in their unconscious, in their actions, the thing that they believe about themselves that is not true. And again, we're going to break this down a lot today. And we'll, if you guys need further explanation on that, I can be glad to expand on it. But there's going to be a lot of examples that we're going to talk about. And it is a very, very big part of your story. And then, you know, you need to know what they need by the end of the story. You know, what did Harry Potter need by the end of the story? You know, what does any character need by the time they get to the end of the story? You have to know what that is before you can actually understand your character. And then most importantly, you have to be a five-year-old child asking why about everything. And why do we care? You know, because the more you break down the why of your character, like, okay, so he feels lonely, and why? Okay, because he was an orphan. Well, why was he an orphan? You know, the more you do that, the more you address the why the reader should care part of it. Okay. For the sake of this seminar, I'm going to use images from a movie, and I'm using a movie because I can use images. So that's going to take us to the 40-Year-Old Virgin. Now, maybe you've all seen it, maybe you all haven't, but we're going to break down the story as we go. And there's a specific reason in the end why I chose this movie, and we will get to that point. But each point that I go through, we're going to break down the point in the movie in which they actually take that on. So obviously we're on characters here, so we're gonna work on defining the character. Now, in your manuscript, this would be the introduction portion of the story, kind of just getting your readers familiar with who you're dealing with, or what characters you're dealing with, and what their traits are, what we should know about them. You're not dumping everything here, but you're giving us enough to truly feel like we've just met this person and we've gotten to know at least the basics about them. So this is Andy Stitzer. He is a shy 40-year-old introvert who works as a stock supervisor at an electronic store called Smart Tech. After numerous failed attempts at having sex. He lives alone in an apartment with a collection of action figures and video games, and is, as the title will tell you, still a virgin. Now, it's a very basic description, but you get the idea. We know his age. We know a good bit about his personality, his lack of professional advancement, and his personal interests. We could take this and truly break it down, break down his traits, his use of language, and how he managed to make his 4-year-old virgin. In your story, you're going to want to do that. And we will with him. We'll understand him a little bit more as we go along. All right, so now we're going to play another guessing game. What I want you to do is tell me what story this is. We're going to world building with iconic images, starting here. Heart, right? That's it, Michael. Good job. All right. What about this one? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Correct. And this is a little bit more difficult because this could be multiple answers. It's only really one, but Cinderella is correct, Michael. Good job. And I only say that because you look at this and instantly your first thought is just strictly Disney. And the fun little fact about Disney, Disneyland has the Sleeping Beauty castle. Disney World has the Cinderella castle, which is this one. And that is the end of, my talk about Disney. So anyway, we have all that there. And the thing that we want to take from this is that these are iconic images. These are things that stick with you. And Telltale Heart has never been a movie, obviously. But the image that is evoked there as Edgar Allan Poe tells the story, just that visual of the heart being underneath the floorboards is something that sticks with you. And it's so easy to look at that picture and know what story you're talking about. Now, with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there are so many possibilities that you could use for iconic images, but that lamppost is the one. That's the point at which they've just walked into Narnia for the first time, into the snowy field on the other side of the wardrobe, and then there's this lamppost, and it is the symbol of the change of the worlds in that story. And of course, Cinderella is just an iconic image just because of Disney. So this is the portion that I call "Do you see what I see?" Now, when you're world building, you have to hit on the visuals. When I did a show versus tell story, I did this game, and we're going to play this at the end of it. But for now, when I talk about visual components of a story, what I mean is you first and foremost need to hit on the senses, every scene, every location, every moment. And I know that doesn't just describe the visual components of it, but beyond sight, the senses are so very important from the detail. Even if you're talking about smell, or if you're talking about taste, or you're talking about what you hear, it creates in the mind of the reader a connection to a memory, to a moment, to something that they relate to, and it creates a visual inside their head. So I'm not strictly talking about you creating a visual scene as much as you need to create something that the reader feels and sees visually within their head. Now, your POV is your gateway to the world. You only need to give the reader what your character sees, knows, or experiences. This is very, very important, and this is something that it does happen a lot in writing, where you're telling the story and you've got this extra information that you want to be able to pass along, and you sort of jump out of the character's head to say something that character wouldn't even know, especially if you're dealing in first person. There's no way that a first person individual, short of having some sense of telepathy or mind reading ability, they're not going to know what's going on in somebody else's head, and they're not going to know that person's motivations unless they've told them. You want to be able to make sure your reader only knows what your character sees, knows, or experiences. That way the reader is pulled along with your character, and short of another POV giving some insight that your protagonist doesn't know, and that's just a multiple POV story, the reader would never know that. Now, if you think you've described it well enough, I recommend that you add more. And I say this a lot because editing it's a lot easier to take things out than it is to have to add things. Now, you can write a very rough draft of your manuscript and then go back and add detail in, but you're going to be doing a lot of edits. And so as you're doing a lot of edits, then you need to make sure that you're adding more detail. Because again, if you have added too much detail that it's taking the story away, then you or an editor are going to see that at some point in time. So definitely describe as deeply as you can and give the reader as much detail as they can take. Now, this one, show don't tell, you've heard the phrase. It's something that is very, very important. When you're creating a character, you want to show how they're feeling, or you want to show characteristics, mannerisms. We want to learn about the character or the action through the visual, not through you telling. You don't want to tell your reader that your character was scared. You don't want to tell them that, that they weren't sure how to behave in front of somebody. Just give us some awkwardness if they don't know how to behave in someone. Everybody has little tendencies, whether it's tapping the feet or crossing their arms or, playing with their hair. Everybody has little tells that you can show and give the reader a better idea about the character, because not only are you telling them about how they feel, or what their perspective is, but you're giving us more about the character, and we're beginning to see a much broader and deeper picture of that character. Now, our world is driven by images, so evoke them. Give your readers Instagram instead of a blog, and obviously I don't mean just give me a book of pictures, but think visually of those moments. Think visually of those things in your manuscript that define a scene or define the story in general, and build off of that image. Again, the more visual you can make it for a reader, the more it plays in their head as they're reading it like a movie. And you want to be able to keep that flow so they're not thrown out of it. Now, with proper visuals, your story can be viewed in a series of still images. And this is the game that I played when I did my show versus tell workshop at the Broadleaf Writers Conference a few years ago, and it's something that I will be doing again. So I'm going to give you a series of images, and I'm going to talk about them because we could just go on and on about it in the chat. But what I want you to think about is what you see, and then we're going to talk about how much we get from that. All right. The first image. Now, on the surface, this is just an image of a wedding, and we could stop there and say, hey, it's a wedding and something happened. But we have to ask that. We have to that 5-year-old, why? What is happening here? Obviously, we've got some laughter in the background. We've got what looks like the best man sitting here with his head in his hand. We've got somebody digging through the seat. So the first thought is, he's lost the ring. And that's pretty bad. Yeah, ring drop. I'm with you on that one, Lori. And but we have to dig a little bit deeper. Like, well, what happened? How did he drop the ring? Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he didn't really have a lot of confidence in being the person that had to hand over a ring, or maybe he was distracted by somebody in the seats. We've got the bride and groom who are certainly laughing, and that tells us that obviously this is not out of character. This is something that this particular best man is it probably didn't surprise them at all that he dropped the ring or that it got away from him and now they're trying to find it. It also tells us a lot about them in that moment, that, you know, as much of a break as this is from this beautiful moment they're having, that they laugh about it, that they you know, tells us that maybe they're a little bit easier to get along. Oh yeah, Lori, that's a good one. Maybe he's even an ex-boyfriend, you know, the best man. You can dig into this pretty deep. I mean, even the bridesmaids in the background are having a laugh about this moment. If you look at the pastor or the preacher, he's definitely got a smile on his face. So this is definitely a lighthearted moment. This is definitely something that left everybody with a sense of amusement about it. And the more that we dig into this, the more we probably start to uncover a backstory. You know, like Lori said, you know, maybe he's an ex-boyfriend, which then takes us into, well, how did he become the ex-boyfriend? How did he become the ex-boyfriend while his best friend then married the girl? And how did they stay friends? Let's see, Michael says, my baby brother was a ring bearer at 4 or 5 and he wet his pants right in the middle of the ceremony. Exactly. And there's so much story to that. That is a snapshot of the moment, but there's so much to that. You know, you then have to ask about the you know, the baby brother. You have to ask about the you know, what maybe did he continue to have issues like that? But yeah, so anyway, so there's a lot in this image, and we can continue to work backward and backward and backward and backward and backward, and then we can even go forward after that. But it's a very striking and visual image, and it's something that that undoubtedly would stick with your reader if they were to experience it. Now this is other one I just absolutely love. This one, obviously, you've got a family playing Yahtzee. I don't know if the kid just got Yahtzee or if she just really happy about rolling dice. I have no idea, but you know, there's so much detail. You know, you've got apparently the father and you've got the daughter, but there's so much detail here. And much like the image before where your eyes are drawn to the ring bearer, the best man, there's so much detail in the background there that you can actually look at. And here, when you're thinking about describing this particular scene, you know, not only are you really focused on the daughter's elation and the father being supportive or whatever's happening in this moment, but you have the life behind them. You know, you have everything from the type of kitchen that they have to the fact that they are sitting at the dining room table having a game night. You know, there's so much there. What does Yahtzee even mean? Hey, you know, Lori, I learned this very recently. Yahtzee is like the pinnacle moment of this game. Yahtzee is like a dice version of poker, and if you get 5 of the same kind, then you have Yahtzee and you get a boatload of points. So anyway, that's like, most people don't get that. So she's obviously very excited about it, but there's so much detail in here that you can break down. All right. This one is just, I don't know. This isn't something that we're going to break down. I brought it in because it's an image that I use, and an image that if you've ever been on the internet, you've probably seen. And like the other ones, there is a story here. It's fun to build our own story, much as everybody on the internet did. It certainly seems like this little girl is possibly very proud of something she did, or very secretively enjoying the house burning, when in fact it was actually just this random moment of a family that was watching this fire and the fireman putting it out, and the daughter turned around and that was just her expression. But the point is that there's so much in this image that you can take and run with and tell such a great story from. All right. Now here's where I'm going to be just a little bit self-indulgent, and I'm going to read a section from The Weight of Ashes, and then just kind of hope that it sort of speaks to what I was talking about. The ball nearly touched the ceiling, an inch or two from raining plaster down on Mitch as he lay on his bed, but he never hit it. He knew distance like a dog sensed a storm. I swear he had radar in his brain. As if ordered to obey, the ball stopped short, hovered a split second, red stitch seam spinning a turn, then dropped into his waiting glove. It landed with a soft tap in the worn leather. Despite the crumpled look of it, the way it flopped about as if it barely held together, Mitch could snap that glove to attention with the slightest twitch of his fingers. In a flash, he had the ball again, palm tight as he craned his arm beside his head. Then he let it go with the flick of a wrist, fingers pointing to the spot he wanted to go, the spot it always went. It was mesmerizing. So can you see the image here? For those of you who had popcorn ceilings, did you feel, even though I didn't specifically say popcorn ceiling or anything like that, did you feel it? Have you ever experienced that before and you knew what it was? If you were a fan of baseball, could you smell the leather of the glove? Could you see the floppiness of the glove? Could you see the seams of the baseball spinning and falling into the glove? And then most importantly, that through this visual, we get the sense of a younger brother watching his older brother do this and being completely in awe. Obviously, he idolizes his brother. He feels as if his brother can do no wrong, and even though it's a mesmerizing thing, it's not something that surprises him. You get a strong visual of the scene, and you learn about the characters. And I really honestly cannot stress this point enough, that you can develop such depth in your characters by showing their reactions to action. And again, that is a phrase we're going to go over several times today. That is a reaction to action. That's one of the ways that you can tell your readers so much about your characters, whether they're your protagonists, whether they're side characters, whether they're the antagonists, it doesn't matter. Their actions, their reactions to action tell the reader so much about the character. All right. Now, what draws people to a great song, to a painting or sculpture, or to any artistic work? And it's always going to be emotional connection. For you, it's imperative your readers connect emotionally to your characters and to your story. So how do you do that? First and foremost, we have to answer the most obvious question. What is empathy? Well, empathy most definitely is not sympathy. Sympathy is concern or worry over another's situation, while empathy is understanding the thoughts and feelings of others. And that's a very, very important thing to remember as we go forward and as you write your books, because what you're looking for is a sense of empathy that you're both that your characters can have for one another, but primarily that your readers have for your characters. You want them to understand the thoughts and feelings of your characters. So first, you have to ask yourself, who are you writing for? If you're writing a kid's book, you need to understand what it is that emotionally connects kids to characters or to moments. If you're writing a book about, I'll go back to baseball, you're writing about baseball, you have to understand what your reader is probably going to be somebody who loves baseball, and they're going to want to know as much as they could possibly know about it so that you can create that connection to their characters. Now, if you can put yourself in the place of your characters, your writing will resonate. If you're going to, like in The Weight of Ashes, my lead character is dealing with the loss of his brother, and putting myself in his place and understanding his grief helped me to emotionally deepen the character and to create that sense of connection for the reader. Now, your characters are always going to be your gateway to the readers. They are the ones that, as I said before, they're the ones that are seeing everything. They're the ones that are offering information. They're the ones that are showing feelings or expressing thoughts, whatever it happens to be. You have to remember that as vital as getting storytelling is, correct, that you have to make sure that your characters serve as the gateway. They're the ones walking through the world. They're the ones walking through the story. Now, Empathy can be found in images as well. Again, without knowing what the story is, we see this image and there is an emotion to it. You may have your own interpretation of what that emotion is, and that emotion may be determined by your own experiences, but it evokes an emotional connection. And then you have this one, and I picked this one specifically because this is Kimberly Jones, who is an Atlanta area activist and author, and just an all-around amazing person. But it was such a great image, and in this moment, you can feel her emotion. You can feel the importance. You can feel what she is going through, at least from an outward perspective. Obviously we don't know internally, but we can feel her moment. And then this one, again, you have a wheelchair, you have a man staring at the wheelchair. You can come up with your own story from this, and that's fine. But if you're writing a scene about this and you're talking about this man who's staring at this wheelchair, whatever the reason is, you have to leave the reader with this feeling that, that we begin to understand, we begin to have empathy for what he's going through emotionally, what it means to him to have to get up in the morning and look at that chair, to have to climb into that chair. Maybe it's the first time, maybe he's been doing it for 10 years, but every single time there has to be some importance to it. There has to be some emotional connection that evokes a sense of empathy in your reader. Much like the show versus tell images earlier, if you take a snapshot, a single powerful moment in your manuscript, and dive deep into the why, then you can create a connection that sticks with your readers. Now, this one, I think is probably, as empathy is concerned, the most important thing. Now, you, as a human being, have accumulated how many ever years you have been allowed to live on this earth. You have accumulated experiences. You have accumulated trauma. You have accumulated grief. You have accumulated loss. You have accumulated struggle and failure. You've also experienced success and joy and love and happiness, hopefully, and you have that inside you. And there's so much connective tissue between you and every single other person with these experiences. You need to put them into your story. It doesn't mean you have to tell your story unless that's what you're trying to do. It doesn't mean that you have to create characters that are you. Again, unless that's just something you want to do. But you can take everything and put it into your story. And if you draw from your own experiences, you make it easier for your readers to connect to your characters. Empathy is vital. You have to make the moment bigger, whether it's a panic attack, whether it's grief, the euphoria of a new relationship, standing at the altar, or the gut punch of being fired. You possess within you the memory of that emotion and of that moment. You have to put every ounce of it into your story. Using the weight of ashes, and we'll cover this again coming up, but my main character is obviously going through a lot of grief. And so I had to take experiences that I had with grief and I had to put it into the character. And it was emotionally challenging. And it was something that I feel made the character stronger and therefore made the story stronger. So as your character is your gateway to the world, to the story, and for your reader, you have to be able to put all of what you've experienced into those moments. Obviously not all of it, but whatever is relevant, you need to be able to put it in there. Whether that is trying to describe an awkward moment, if you had any difficulty as a kid, talking to a boy or a girl, then you have to draw from that if that's what your character is going through. If they're observing somebody else, if they're confident but they're observing somebody else in an awkward moment, and you're trying to draw from that awkwardness, then it's on you to get into the head of that character that is confident, that doesn't experience awkwardness. And it's up to you to be able to find what that character sees. You have to be able to leave the confines of your head in that moment and draw from something to understand what somebody would feel when they don't understand a behavior. Because obviously we have all had that moment where we watched somebody behave in such a way that we didn't understand it. And it's so very important that you find those moments. Now, I think, yeah, that is the end of the first session, and I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions on this. So I do hope that you guys have questions that we can go through. If you do, please add them to the file. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to talk to you about this kind of stuff. But for now, we're going to stop screen share, and we're going to come back. And welcome to the sunlight that comes in through my window in the day. See, like that. But I do want to try to answer some questions if you guys have any before we move on to a break in the next session. But if we go back through this, the character aspect of your story is something that you need to work on, and in the character sheet that I will send you with the videos after next week, after I've got the videos edited, is something that you can use. And I really highly recommend that you dig into that conscious desire and the unconscious misbelief, because we all have within us those things that we want. Okay, let's say you want to be a published writer. You want to have thousands or more readers reading your work. You want to be successful at it. But you have this feeling, this unconscious or very present feeling that you're not good enough, or that you're not ever going to get there, or that you could never possibly understand it enough, or you never have that luck. Whatever one of those that really defines, and I'm not specifically saying you, this is more of a generalized you, that you as a character, that you believe you can't do. And so if we're looking at this from a story standpoint, that you have this character that wants this thing, but believes that they can't get it, then it's on you to be able to take those two things and build out your character and your story, for that matter. I mean, your story is quite obviously going to be, this character has to begin to understand by the end of the book that their unconscious misbelief was wrong. That again, it's a misbelief that they could actually succeed, but in order for them to get there, they have to go through all of the struggle and all of the difficulties of learning and of growing, and being able to have that moment where they realize, no, I can do this. And it's not the moment that they get published. It's a moment that they realize, no, I can do this, and that they set forth and actually accomplish their goal. And it's just very, very important that you build out those two things. First question. That was good. Jess, thank you. Can you talk about how you create such well-rounded supporting character? For me, it's honestly a matter of getting to observe people. I don't care if you're a quiet person like I am, or if you're a talkative person. In a more normal setting, we get to go out and we get to sit in cafes, or we go to the store, or we're around family, or we're with friends, or you're always again, when life is normal, you're always in a setting where there are people around you. I know so many writers will talk about airports, and it's such a true thing. You watch people and you see mannerisms. It's a bit stalkery, and there's not much you can do about that. But I would say the first part of the answer to that question is just understanding the way people move, understanding the way that people talk, the way their facial expressions move, whether or not they make eye contact, what do they do with their feet or their hands when they're talking or when they're listening, when they're nervous, when they're excited. There are so many ways that you can actually show me that a character is something without having to ever tell me that. And that's one way. The other way is just that annoying question of why, of never being satisfied with an answer, of always wanting to make sure that you have a full and complete grasp of why your characters are doing what they're doing. And again, you're going to end up drawing from your own experiences. You're going to end up drawing from experience of others that you've been around. You're going to be drawing upon those emotional moments when it was too overwhelming to deal with, whatever it happens to be. And if you infuse those in your characters, if you use them with the physical characteristics, and then blend in, the mannerisms and their habits, and then throw on top of that the emotional weight that they carry, in whether it's a moment or in the story, then your characters are going to come to life. They're going to be vibrant. They're going to be memorable. If we think about, I'll go back to our examples. You think about Harry Potter and you think about everything that she built in there. It's not just the lightning scar or the disheveled hair, or the baggy clothes when we meet. It's his mannerisms as he goes through. And J.K. Rowling did a really good job of describing how, physically, how he interacted with his aunt and uncle and cousin. She did a really good job of building out how he experienced this new world that he went into. It's so apparent that he is the character that you remember. Sherlock Holmes, on the other hand, the confidence. I don't know. There's something about the hat and the pipe. It just speaks of confidence. The way he talks to Watson, it's a bit condescending, and you get that insufferable know-it-all feel from him without having to be told that he is that person. And obviously, the way he goes about solving clues and everything definitely tells you a lot about his intellect. But and then we had Charlotte, who was another one, but that's a little bit harder to describe. But if you think about all the stories that you have loved growing up, your characters are the thing that you remember, and you remember so much about how they behave, the way they use language. Like for me, I a lot, and I now going to draw that to your attention, but you have to kind of think about that with your character and ask yourself, why would they do that? What is it that's going on that makes them have to break in between saying something? And you have to be able to dig as deep as you possibly can. All right. Any other questions so far? Please do ask. And I know we're kind of scratching the surface here, but we definitely have a lot of detail to get into coming up. So the other aspect of this part of your story that is very important is the introduction. And this is one area that writers I know struggle with. And it's because we spend so much time building out our characters, and we spend out so much time building out our world, that we want to be able to give all that information to the reader. We feel like it's absolutely vital that they know it. And if you haven't heard the phrase info dump before, this is where this happens. I would throw a percentage on it, probably 9 out of every 10 times. The info dump is going to come right in the beginning, because you as the writer feel like the reader can't actually be immersed in the world or into the character without dumping all of this backstory on there. And you have to be very, very careful with that, because a little bit of detail can go a long way. And you want to be able to offer something without giving everything away. I heard the phrase recently in I think it was a blog by Jane Friedman, when she was talking about, she was actually citing an excerpt that said that you had to be able to give, for example, 2 questions in a chapter and only answer 1. And you need to take that approach to all of the backstory and all of the the pertinent details of the political strife in your world, whatever it happens to be. You have to be able to give the reader a couple of questions and only answer one. It doesn't mean that you're not going to answer it at all. It means that you're going to answer it later. And it's kind of the cliffhanger approach to structuring your intro. You have to be able to give them enough to understand what's going on while leaving questions that are going to be answered later. And it is a struggle. It is something that you have to work hard on. But if you get to a moment in your writing where, and you're reading it and you see something that just feels like a very listy sort of thing, something that might be bullet points of detail, remember a couple things. One, that never works. You have to be able to describe things, break them apart and describe them in a sort of organic way. And because the reason it doesn't work is because it brings the reader out of a flow. The last thing a reader wants to do is have all this thing. I mean, think about reading a textbook. You know, if you had to just read the details of history, of any particular historical event, but you didn't have any context to it, then it sort of just, it doesn't resonate. It doesn't affect you. It's not something that you, if you knew you were studying World War II and you knew a particular story and these were details that were given to you throughout the teaching of it, then you would be able to actually immerse yourself into it more. Question from Marianne: do you write character analysis of all your characters when you are starting out a story? I do. I use Scrivener because I got tired of having 18 notebooks that I needed to sort through and pages that I needed to sort through to find it. And also I have terrible handwriting. But I have character details for every single character that I do. And I try to take that same approach to the worksheet that I showed you before, to each character. And I try to break down their histories. I try to break down their mannerisms. I try to break down what they want and what they believe incorrectly about themselves. But yes, Marianne, I know a day-long workshop of Scrivener, it would take a day. But you also have to be open to letting the character develop through your story, and you need to have a framework to understand it, and also remember that you're not going to nail everything correctly in your first draft. You're going to go back and you're going to see where you can add things. You're going to understand your character better. I do a silly exercise when I'm confused on a character where I have to establish enough about the character to be able to do this, but I literally have an interview with them. I did this once on the blog with the character, and it was a lot of fun, where I do a stream of consciousness interview with the character, and I just start asking questions, and in the mind of the character, I let them answer. And the interesting thing is that, especially in the blog that I had done about it, you learn about your character in ways that you couldn't have before, because you're letting what you know about the character answer the question. And they may throw something up that, which is a terrible phrase that I shouldn't have used. They may say something that allows the character, or allows you to better understand not only the character, but the story. And these are silly but fun exercises that help you really deepen your character. And I highly recommend, please, before you sit down to start writing something, make sure that you are spending the time to get to know your characters, primarily the ones that are going to carry your story, your protagonist, your antagonist, even your B characters, but we'll talk about a little bit more later. Get to know them well enough that whatever your framework is, whatever you do with outlining, whether it is a deep, thorough outline, or whether you're what people call pantser, which is you have a mental outline and you're just working off of that, try to understand your characters enough that when you get to a scene, you kind of organically can see how they would behave in that moment. Because the better that you understand your characters, the deeper that you dive into every little detail about their characters before you start writing, the better it's going to be for your reader and for your story. You want to make sure that you have these things built into your character that help your reader emotionally connect to them. And I don't care if they're in your book for a few scenes or if they're carrying the entire story. there has to be a reason for it. And this is something that I go back to a lot. Everything that you put in a story has to have a purpose. We'll talk a little bit more about Chekhov's gun later, that was mentioned in Stephen King's On Writing. But when you're creating characters, or whether you're creating a world, or whether you're creating the story itself, you have to make sure that you have all the details in there, and that every detail serves a purpose. Again, as you go back and edit, you're going to add more, and that's fine. But you have to be able to have something in that finished version that really resonates and really creates those visuals. Michael has a question. Since you mentioned Scrivener, how do you deal with the fact that it's not on the cloud? I write all over, homework, on my phone, on my computer. And when I tried using Scrivener, I ended up feeling trapped by not being able to access my work anywhere I wanted. Has this been a problem for you? Okay, so I will answer that by saying that I only use Scrivener as a means to serve as my notebooks. Once upon a time, I used the actual writing function in there, where I could write my story in Scrivener, and it was good. It was nice to have it right there. It was nice to have the access, but I started experiencing exactly what you're talking about when I wanted to move from my computer, because I don't remember if I had a laptop. I might have been working off a PC at that time when Scrivener first came out. I couldn't then pick it up at work when I had a lunch break or something like that. If I had something that I wanted to add, I had those moments where I wanted to add to my characters, and it was just something that I decided at that moment that I didn't want to write the manuscript in there. So, I always write through Word, and I use Dropbox. I know people who use Google Drive and write off of Google Docs, and that's a way to keep it in the cloud. Otherwise, you're having to compile the document every single time you stop and save it in one of those functions, and that's not that going against the whole purpose of it being easy. Saw something here. Who said that about Save the Cat? Now, Lori, I haven't actually used Save the Cat software, so I don't know. I don't know what that's like. I am very familiar with Save the Cat, and we'll reference it. I know later, but yeah, the program, I don't know, I'll have to look into that. So that's another thing that you can look into. It's Scrivener was the first one to come up with this, but it's not the only one that exists. If you write screenplays, there's the Final Draft, and you can do kind of the same thing there. Save the Cat, something I want to look into. But yeah, there are elements of Save the Cat that I think every writer should know. I will always tell writers that if you love a method, learn as much as you can about it, and then go learn something else. Because as with anything, it's very good to understand something and to know it through and through. But if it becomes your sole vehicle, the only way that you write, you may actually miss something. And the Save the Cat method of story beats is tried and true. And there are people who are very, very supportive of it, and there are people who are very, very against it. And there are always examples of what works and what doesn't. I kind of think of learning like creating the outline for your story. You create this outline for your story, but you have to you may have a beginning, you may have your end, you may have all these points in between, but you have to remain flexible. You have to be able to understand that within the story, within writing your story with your characters, that you have to be able to pivot. I'll even back out of that and say it's like life. You have to be able to pivot on a dime. You have to be able to adjust to where the characters and the story wants to go, because it may not be where you thought it was going to go, and you have to be able to explore that. So I definitely highly recommend Save the Cat as a way to understand the beats of a story. And then once you've come to understand that, and I reference some of them here, take them and use them in your own way. Take them and use them with other information you have. Stephen King's On Writing book is still, for me, the thing that helped me understand writing on a level that I never understood it before. And there's so much information in there that may even conflict with some of the Save the Cat. Yes. Yeah, every time I say pivot, I hear Ross from Friends. So thank you for that. But these are important things. You have to stay flexible. You can't be the insufferable know-it-all with your manuscript. You have to create the world, create the characters. You have to dive in and get that sense of empathy and emotional connection, and understand everything about them and everything about your world. And then you write the story, and you have to let it tell itself. You have to explore different directions. If it takes you in a direction that doesn't work, then obviously you're going to go back and rework things. But here's something that you also have to accept. Rewriting is a part of writing. You're going to write stuff that doesn't work. You're going to write scenes that completely go off the rails. You're going to do that, and you have to be willing to let them go and rewrite it. I have on more than one occasion rewritten an entire novel because it didn't work the way it was. And one of those I have published. The other one, hopefully I'll have published soon. And the only reason that's happening or did happen is because I was willing to just take it, put it aside, and try again. It's a long and painful process, and we hate it, but you have to get it right. And so when you have that moment in your story that your character is taking it somewhere you didn't expect, or saying something you didn't expect, or the story is going in a direction you didn't expect, you can stop and ask why. You can stop and look at it and try to explore it, but do it. Go ahead and start writing it and see where it goes. Go ahead and let that character say what they said in the moment that you weren't expecting, because they are going to carry. And it's such a funny thing, and why it's so important to get to know other writers, because you can't say this kind of thing to non-writers. You can't say, yeah, so I was writing my book last night, and my character said this thing, and I was like, what the hell? I didn't know you knew that. And then they went and did this thing, and I'm like, how did you get there? It doesn't even understand. You start talking about these characters like they're real people, and they are. But if you're not a writer, it just sounds crazy. And you also have to accept that too, that from the standpoint of non-writers, you're a little bit, because you have characters and worlds living up there that are very, very real to you, and you need them to be. And that's what translates well into the story. And then this is where I start rambling, because I'm a writer and I like to talk about writing. So yes, Michael, storytelling is socially acceptable insanity, or at least it is amongst other writers. So we're a couple minutes from the end of the session, or yeah, is that right? Yeah, we're a couple minutes from the end of the session. If there are any last questions that we want to talk about on anything that we discussed today on this topic, please throw them at me now. If not, then we'll probably just stop for now and take a 15-minute break. Just a reminder that when I close this session, not only am I getting the video set aside, but the chat gets saved, and I will save the chat. For this particular one, I may excise all the welcome stuff and just deal with the actual presentation part of it. But so when you get the video, the finished videos, you're going to get the resource guide and the character sheet, and you're going to get a chat transcript from each one, so that anything that happens to come up in there that didn't get mentioned here, that you end up getting that. So, all right, since we don't have any other questions, then I'm going to end this session. Remember that there is a different link for the next session, and that particular session is going to start at 11:15. And so take a break, clear your head, move to the next page of notes, whatever it is that you're doing, look up some stuff, take a bathroom break, whatever you need to do. And then I will open up the next room, I don't know, no later than 11:10, but probably before then. So if so, then we'll just we'll sit there and chat a little bit before we get started again. So that's the end of the first session, and I will see you guys in about 15 minutes.